Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta for this program. Please visit our website, cscatlanta.org, for a complete list of live and recorded events. We invite you to sign up for our newsletter to stay connected to all future programs.
Alrighty, welcome everyone. As I said, my name's Lauren. I'm the Program Director with Cancer Support Community Atlanta. Today, our presentation is on healthy eating and the pharmacologic and behavioral approaches to weight management. Today, our presenter is Valerie, and Valerie is one of the dietitians on the oncology nutrition team with Northside. She covers Georgia Cancer Specialist clinics in Gwinnett, Johns Creek, Athens, and Lake Oconee, and primarily works with medical oncology patients undergoing active chemo treatment. So thank you, Valerie, so much for joining us today. We're happy to have you, and I'm turning the floor over to you now.
All right, and thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I apologize that you can't see me. I don't have a mic, but, well, I have a phone, but I don't have a camera. And so, yes, we're going to be talking about weight management today and also specifically some weight management medications. And here are my objectives for today. So, going to review traditional means of weight loss. We're also going to talk about fasting and the role that can play in weight loss. And we're going to discuss weight loss medications and behavior changes for weight loss. And the first thing I wanted to start with is, why is weight management a big thing? Why is it important? According to the NIH, obesity is considered to be a chronic disease. And as you see, it affects more than 1 in 3 adults and about 17% of children. And it also has been associated with increased risk for a variety of chronic diseases. Um, in addition to that, according to the International Agency for Research on Cancer, high body mass index and excess body weight are also risk factors for several cancers. And we are seeing over the years more cancers associated with higher weight in younger people, which is concerning. And on the other side of that, there's also evidence that intentional weight loss may reduce cancer risk and also lower risk of cancer recurrence. And part of that has to do with lowering inflammation, but also by modifying a lot of the hormones that are involved in metabolism. And we're going to talk more about what that exactly means in the presentation today. And so, a chronic disease defined by the CDC is a condition that lasts for a year or more and requires ongoing medical attention or limits activities of daily living or both. So, when we refer to chronic disease during this presentation, that's the definition that we're using. Okay. So, these I wanted to show because it really shows how things are changing over the years where we live. And so if you look at the map from 2019, you can see that the dark red color is greater than or equal to 35% of the population of that state. And the green color is 20% to 25% of the population of that state. And so we're looking at just 3 years later in 2022, there's really not green anymore on the map. And now the dark red represents 45, greater than 50% of the population. So that's a big jump in a short amount of time. And when we look at what that means for cancer prevalence, And I wish I could have gotten maps of the same year, but you'll see that the places with dark blue are the places with the highest rates of new cancers. And those are a lot of the same places that have the darker colors on the obesity map as well. Okay, so that's why we're talking about this today. And we're going to start with traditional means of weight loss. And so those are the things that came to my mind when I thought of traditional means of weight management. Um, and the big one missing here is probably going to be surgical interventions. And I didn't add that because we're not going to discuss that today. Um, and so when it comes to diet and exercise, um, that's a really broad umbrella where you can be looking at restricting calories. And I think a lot of people probably remember these little containers of different colors that are trying to help you to portion out your food groups. Sometimes diets will restrict certain food groups, like there's these low fat diets, and there's also high fat diets. And some diets also, the main way they work is by changing the eating schedule. Um, One of the big reasons that there's pushback about diets is because of the chronic nature of overweight and obesity. And so when we're looking at interventions, it's really important that the interventions are sustainable, because what we see is that there are changes people can make for short periods of time, but it may be hard to stick to them long term. And so a lot of times, once you discontinue the behavior, the benefits that you're getting from that behavior, those go away. Meal replacement programs were are also all still available. So OptiFast is a medically supervised program. Typically, people will be followed by their doctor, and they will adjust, their shakes or the meals, and transition off of it by doing like part shakes, part real food. And then, kind of an over-the-counter version of that are the Slim Fast programs that we see in stores, and there are lots of other brands available now. Um, there are also meal delivery programs where the meals are already prepared for you, and sometimes they're frozen, sometimes they're fresh, but there are lots of companies out there that use those as a means to help people to reduce their caloric intake. And then a lot of people also ask questions about adding in herbs and botanicals to help with weight loss. And those may be in the forms of teas or powders or even capsules. And so when it comes to dietary supplements for weight loss, um, there's a few things to be mindful of. One is that they're not always proven to actually be helpful, and some of them can also be harmful, because they may also be causing some cell and tissue damage. There are also some that are helpful, with improving glucose and lipid metabolism. And so the herbs and botanicals are ones that you're always going to want to talk to your doctor about, the same way you would talk to your doctor about adding another medication. The other consideration is that dietary supplements are largely unregulated, and so you'll also want to, if that is the route that you were looking at or you had questions about, that's something that you would want to make sure you're getting a reputable brand and the product is what it says it is. And then A lot of people are also using fitness apps and weight loss apps to either log their food or help them to choose foods that are more in line with their goals, or even as a means for accountability when it comes to their fitness goals. And so those are lists of some of the common ones that are available. All right. And then the last of the traditional means of weight loss I wanted to discuss a little bit is fasting. And historically, fasting is really common in religious practices all over the world. But it's also commonly used for weight loss in combination with dietary changes and exercise as a way to restrict calories. When I was preparing for this presentation, I just Googled how many different types of fasting exist, and there were 24 different types that came up. I do not know what all 24 of them are, but I did list the most common ones that we discuss in clinic. And so a lot of people tell me that they're doing one of these four. And with the alternate day fasting, what that is people will either eat every other day or they'll have a few days a week that they significantly restrict their intake. So maybe one day they'll eat normally and the next day they'll limit themselves to half of their normal calories. The one meal a day pattern is also very common and it has gotten a lot of press over the past couple of years. Intermittent fasting is typically where people are fasting for a specific number of hours, and then they have a specific number of hours where they are eating. And with the intermittent fasting, the studies have found that it can be helpful for up to 16 hours. After 16 hours, the benefits do not outweigh the risks. And so it becomes harmful after that point. Um, and then water fasting is where people are cutting out food and only drinking water. And so these are all ones that I've seen and been asked about in clinic. Um, and now I wanted to transition a bit to medications. And so there are several medications that have historically been used for weight reduction, and they work in different ways. Appetite suppressants typically work by affecting our metabolic pathways that affect our hunger and fullness signals to the brain. Um, the lyse inhibitor medications are going to be ones that keep your body from pretty much absorbing the fat in the food. And a lot of times people, I don't know if you all remember this, but there was um, that time where there were those chips that were supposed to, you know, be okay because they were using a fat substitute, but then a lot of people had digestive issues related to that. And we see that a lot with the lipase inhibitor medications where um, because the fat is not being absorbed through the normal pathways, they're noticing different digestive issues. And then there are also anti-diabetic medications such as metformin that are used to also aid in weight loss. And it's important to note that when anti-diabetic medications are used for weight management in people that don't have diabetes, it's being prescribed off-label. Um, Another medication I want to talk about um, is lorcaserin, and this was a medication that was taken off the market in 2020 because it actually increased cancer risk. And I included that just because a lot of times we're seeing new botanicals, new supplements, new medications come on the market, and they really don't get pulled off until a lot of adverse effects are reported. And so it's just always important to proceed with caution and also to make note of any changes, like if you are taking a new medication, so you can share those with your healthcare team. And so a lot of the newer medications used for weight reduction fall under this umbrella of therapies that affect the way um, hormones involved in digestion are present. And quick story, one of my professors when I was in school, his research was really focused on hormones that affect fullness and satisfaction and how monitoring and manipulating those hormones can potentially aid in weight management. And I share that to say that science is theory, it's always changing. So we have this presentation today, and then we might have new information tomorrow. And as these new discoveries are made every day about how our bodies work and the different roles that hormones play in digestion, um, they'll also have different interventions to help with weight management. But one of the big ones that people are talking about right now is glucagon like peptide 1, and it's often referred to as GLP-1. And so, glucagon like peptide 1 receptor agonist or GLP-1 receptor agonist combination medications um, are now being used for weight management, whereas in the past they were only being used for diabetes management. And this hormone is one that we've known about for a long time. It is primarily produced in the intestine. And when everything is working as it should be, our bodies release this hormone after a meal, and it talks the hormone talks to the cells in our pancreas and tells them to produce insulin so we can efficiently use the energy from the food that we've consumed. Okay, so with these medications, we're also finding that these hormones play roles in other parts of our body that affect metabolism. So that's why a lot of people on these medications are also pointing out that they're noticing changes in their cognitive function. They are noticing changes in the signals for their hunger. Um, in the brain, it plays a role in sending fullness signals, and that's part of how it reduces appetite. In the stomach, it's helping to regulate gastric emptying. And in the liver, it's also reducing the amount of glucose that is being stored and released by the liver. And then it's also important to note that these medications have an effect on heart health that have been found to be protective against heart disease, which is an important consideration when thinking about how diabetes and overweight and obesity and heart disease all tend to run together. So it's very common for people dealing with their blood sugars to also be dealing with cholesterol issues. And so it's nice to know that the medication is playing a role in managing those other issues as well. And another thing I wanted to go over is just, some things to know about these medications. So, for the most part, they are injectables. There is an oral form of some of them available, but for the most part, people are using injectables. Like anything else, they do have side effects. So, the main side effects that we see are mild to moderate GI side effects like nausea, diarrhea, and constipation. And those can last from 4 to the first 6 to even the first 8 weeks of treatment, which doesn't seem like that long, but that's, 1 to 2 months. Um, and then they also have warnings saying that people taking these medications need to monitor for symptoms of pancreatitis, such as abdominal pain and nausea and vomiting. And that can be a little bit confusing when the medication itself has this side effect of nausea and vomiting, but then that's also a symptom of the pancreatitis. And then one of the ways that it affects the stomach, like we discussed in the last slide, is by slowing down gastric emptying. And so gastroparesis is also something to be aware of with these medications, because when people are having their digestion slowed down, they may think it's just from the medication, and again, it can be something a little bit bigger. So those are all things that, even though they're common side effects, would be important to discuss with the healthcare team. Um, but the most impressive thing I thought was that with these new therapies, when they're being used just for weight reduction, they've been able to demonstrate weight reduction between 15 to 25%. And that is really big because typically when we're looking at goals for weight reduction with medical nutrition therapy, just with nutrition counseling, we're usually starting at trying to lose around 6% of body weight. If we're looking at 10%, we're being really ambitious, and this is around double of that. Um, However, just like with the behavioral changes and the diets, discontinuation of the treatment is also associated with weight regain. And so, in terms of people who probably shouldn't use these medications, I would definitely say people with gastroparesis. Um, Gastroparesis is already a common complication of diabetes. And so people often describe it as being really uncomfortable, because they're getting full very quickly. It's hard to get enough food in when you're feeling uncomfortable like that. And then with the medication also slowing the gastric emptying, this can make it worse. Um, and gastroparesis is just a condition where the stomach emptying is delayed. Um, Also, anyone with a history of pancreatitis, this would not be an appropriate intervention. And then there are certain cancers, including thyroid cancer and some other endocrine cancers, where they caution against using these types of medications. Um, and the last point that I put is eating disorders, and that is mainly because even if the eating disorder is in remission, that's something really serious that you wouldn't want to trigger that cycle of disordered eating behaviors, um, this type of treatment. Okay, and so I've listed some other modifiable risk factors that we look for when it comes to cancer risk, and that is really why we focus on nutrition, is because it's something that we can change. And we found that we can make statistically significant changes when it comes to chronic disease and the related complications with lifestyle changes. And this is before I knew that everybody was going to be muted, so we don't have to answer this question about healthy eating. But I did want to just go over again what looks like a healthy meal pattern. So typically, we are looking at getting lots of plants in your diet. Um, Ideally 5 to 7 servings a day. Also, having a source of lean protein with each meal, having vegetables, fruits, grains, and pretty much making your plate colorful because those different pigments in your different vegetables are also going to help with reducing inflammation. Um, and then when it comes to things we want to kind of cut back on in a healthy meal pattern, definitely having fewer, fast foods and other foods that are very high in fat and sugar. Um, and part of that can look like cutting back on a lot of sugary beverages. We also recommend limiting or at least, abstaining completely from alcohol. And so when it comes to um, tips to help with making healthy meals, one of the things that we recommend is trying to prep ahead of time so that it's taking some of that work away for you and the energy that you have to put a healthy meal together um, is not a barrier for you to having a healthy meal. So even if you can't make a whole dish, even if you can just like cut up some ingredients, that will help you to get those plant foods in throughout the week. Um, Also, if you have leftover proteins, like maybe a leftover piece of chicken or something, you can use that in a soup or in a bowl or even in a salad to help with just making your meal more complete. Um, and also considering using more than one cooking method so that you don't have like 4 pots that you're managing over the stove. And this is a visual method of what a healthy plate looks like. So we definitely want you to have some non-starchy vegetables on your plate. In this image, you can see that it's a salad, but it can be cooked non-starchy vegetables, like green beans or broccoli or whatever types of greens you like. Um, Having some type of carbohydrate food. So whether that's like your potato or pasta or rice, and then also some source of protein. And then ordering out is a part of life for a lot of people. You have appointments to go to, sometimes you're short on time. So some tips for ordering out would be considering ordering just the entree instead of the whole combo, and maybe bringing like a little snack bag of your carrots or an applesauce or some type of plant food along with you. Also, if you are ordering to go, you can take the food home and eat off of a regular plate or out of a regular bowl that you have. And that's really going to help with managing the portion size because sometimes in those to go containers, we don't realize how much food we're getting in them until we put it out on the plate. And then the other recommendation would be to, if you can't bring your whole meal with you, if you can't pack a whole meal, to at least bring some plant foods along with you. And then the last thing I want to talk about is physical activity. And that is because when it comes to weight management, the goal is always to reduce the risk of weight regain as well. And we find that physical activity is going to be helpful in reducing weight regain, but it's also going to be helpful in maintaining muscle mass and also really helpful just for general functionality, quality of life. And so we encourage you to find ways that you enjoy being active. Doesn't have to be, you know, going to the gym. It can be something you like to do at home, um, or something that you'd like to do other places in the community. And so that was all I had today in terms of the information I wanted to go over.
Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta for this program. If you're interested in other live or recorded programs, please visit the online program tab of our website, cscatlanta.org, or follow us on Facebook. We'll be sharing additional information on upcoming programs.